thing that is always the case with cyber criminals is there's this huge industry, both sides. There's an industry of people who are looking to counter and mitigate against cyber risk, but it seems to me at the moment the cyber criminals are always managing to stay one step ahead, and that's something to be very wary of, I think. SME businesses, small medium enterprise businesses, are, we believe, particularly vulnerable because generally speaking they lack the kind of infrastructure that the bigger firms have, and therefore they just are inherently more vulnerable, and they are targeted actually disproportionately by the cyber criminals. So just moving on to another slide, Perry, just a few numbers. These are just, we do our own research, and we also aggregate other people's research, and KYND does a similar kind of thing. We just thought you might be interested to see some of the numbers that strike us as being quite relevant. So yeah, well, 78% of consumers concerned their information is not kept secure on websites. I think with very good reason. There have been a number of very, very high profile incursions onto big brand websites in the last several years. And as a consequence of this, a lot of people have had their passwords compromised, and if they haven't taken the advice of changing passwords after those incursions have happened, then they should certainly do that. And in fact, passwords should be changed very regularly in any case, because one of the features of incursions with high profile firms is they don't always report them immediately. Some of them come months afterwards, which we don't think is terribly responsible, to be honest. So how much is your data worth on the dark web? So it ranges from just a credit card with bank information would trade for £9 or so on average, up to £750 for complete passport information that can be validated and verified, and you can then forge passports from that. Another point is that we all have our Alexas and Google Home and similar gadgets these days. An estimate that we've had is that by 2023, an average UK home will have 50 Internet of Things connections on average, which we think is a sort of staggeringly fast, rapid progression of that particular trend in using that kind of technology. And with every part of technology that's deployed in that way comes a vulnerability as well. So people just need to be aware of the vulnerabilities that they're introducing and take appropriate steps to stop it when they're putting that kind of thing into their homes. Staggering numbers on the business side, 65,000 cyber attacks are made daily on SMEs. 81% of staff within SMEs don't receive any formal training on cyber security. 35% of businesses hit by cyber attacks saw cyber security as a low priority before they got hit, of course. Afterwards, they would have considered it to be fairly cataclysmic, which we'll come to later. But the average cost per year is estimated as being, well, in 2018, it was estimated at £13.6 billion for firms to, the losses that firms have suffered and the cost of recovery from cyber breaches, which is quite, unless you sort of look at it in the context of what Rishi Sunak's spending at the moment, is a fairly staggering amount. But anyway, you will all, virtually everybody will actually know somebody who has been hit, or a business which has been hit by a cyber attack. It's that common. And it's really just something waiting to happen with every business. The trick is to make sure that you're prepared for it, and it's very possible to make yourself better prepared than most firms do, actually. Okay, Perry. Well, I'm not going to talk for much longer, actually, but I did want to get one little thing off my chest. We don't cover ourselves in glory in this region. We're not the worst, but we're certainly not the best. So North Yorkshire as a county is actually 10th worst overall in England, which is not great, but we're second worst in this area, Northern England. And West Yorkshire is only just behind North Yorkshire. Actually, I think the worst hit area, I think, was Cambridgeshire, I think it was. Probably not surprising because there are more tech businesses in that area, but it's something to be aware of, and Yorkshire firms in particular need to take note of this and do things right now to improve their cyber security. Harry? Here's an obvious question, really. Those 65,000 cyber attacks every day, there's 6 million SMEs in the UK, how many do you think have insurance in place? Well, we wouldn't have put those numbers up actually unless it was right at the lower end. Only 10% of businesses in the UK have actually purchased cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is an after the event package which can really help you to recover from a cyber hack. My own view is, and the view of everybody else on this panel, actually it's much better to stop an attack happening in the first place than it is to try and recover from it afterwards. Such is the impact of an attack. But there are insurances that are available, and they're not expensive in relative terms, and you need to avail yourselves of those insurances as part of your overall package to protect yourselves against the worst impact of cyber incursions. Perry. So Ria likes this as one of my types of things that I say. Inaction is not an option. You must take action. You can't afford to do nothing with this. You should be regarding this as one of the clear and present dangers to your business if you're an SME, and as one of your clear and present dangers to your lifestyle if you're a private individual. Such is the impact of cyber risk. There are two aspects of this. One is risk management, stopping something happening in the first place. And then in the worst eventuality, when something does happen, there's insurance available to help you get back on your feet, to help you get your business back on your feet or your life back on your feet if you're a private individual. We've got a number of things that we are proud to be able to offer in CPP and KYND. I'm now going to pass over to Ben, actually, who will talk you through what KYND does and how that can help in the risk mitigation and prevention part of it. So thanks everybody for coming. I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Cool. Thank you very much, Michael. Let me just start sharing my screen. Hang on a second. That should be done nice and smoothly. Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to obviously take part in Leeds Digital Festival, thanks to CPP. Yeah, look, 2020 has been obviously a challenge for everyone, you know, businesses especially, and as pointed out by Michael there, you know, technology trends are just going at an exponential rate. It's of course something everyone is going to be aware of on this call, and is going to be highlighted across this festival in various forms. It's been around for a long time, and as the bio of this event suggests, COVID-19 might have pushed cybercrime down the agenda, but its grip on industries and its prevalence is greater than it's ever been, and it isn't going to go anywhere. Ransomware, financial fraud, business interruption are some of the most serious risks facing any business connected to the internet. And that's a pretty big statement. There's hundreds of statistics that we could pull, and we've seen some already, that could be pointed out in terms of average cost of a data breach and the amount of times the attacks happen. Just ask Travelex, from a well-planned ransomware attack coupled with the COVID pressures has forced one of the largest trading platforms into administration, or close to 1,300 odd jobs gone. But I'm falling foul right now of a common trend in this space, which is kind of, you know, big scary statements and lots of jargon. What actually is cyber risk? What does it mean? How does it affect businesses of all sizes? Well, first of all, there's no definition for cyber risk actually on Wikipedia. That's why it's often misunderstood. It's represented in inconsistent ways. It's really shrouded in ambiguity. It's kind of geek speak that needs to be translated into the language of everyday businesses, into senior management of large corporations, small businesses, boards. It's actually a favorite quote of ours here at KYND. Our CEO, Andy Thomas, says this quite a lot, but if cyber risk was just an IT problem, it would have been solved by now. And I think that really rings true. So just over the next 5 or so minutes, maybe 7 minutes, I just want to kind of offer some tangible guidance and some tips, looking at the 3 most common areas cyber risk is causing businesses pain, and ultimately shed some light on what actually is cyber risk on the commercial, on the business side. So in the lead up to this, we actually put out a few questions to a few attendees, seeing if anyone was around to be able to jump in and offer a real cyber related incident that's happened. And Chris, yeah, we won't name the company, but Chris actually elected himself to put forward an actual event. So Chris, I don't know if you're there and you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi Ben, hi everyone.
Oh, hey Chris. Thanks for being part of this. Chris, if you just explain the cyber-related incident. I mean, obviously, I know what you're going to say, so this ties in very nicely to what I'm going to lead into. But yeah, what happened?
Basically, our MD was at a trade show event at the NEC at the start of the year, and the accountant received an email on a Friday afternoon that a vendor needed paying quickly to transfer some funds. Then we went back in on the Monday. We asked the MD to sign off on it, and they had no clue that it happened. So the money was, it was gone. We didn't manage to get it back.
Gone. Yeah, exactly. And obviously, I knew you were going to say that, but it highlights it really well. And it's one of the most common forms of cyber criminal activity, and exactly the one I wanted to talk to you about. It's email spoofing and business email compromise. Exactly as pointed out there, really. This really underpins the mechanism required to conduct hacking activities such as phishing, CEO fraud, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. I've had experience of. Of course, I'm talking about emailing. Everyone uses it. And it's a commonly held misconception that businesses can't really do anything about it, that it's just phishing coming from the outside in. So just as forgery was a key method used by traditional criminals as a gateway to more complex crime, email spoofing is the forgery of an email sender address so that the message appears to have come from someone other than the actual source. And it really preys on our trust. It's highly deceptive, either an email from a brand that you're aware of asking you to click a link, or a colleague of yours or your boss, which interestingly plays into the kind of office hierarchy, the nature of human fallibility when it comes to cyber risk. How many employees would know to question an instruction from a CEO when it looks like it's coming from a legitimate email address that you're used to? We actually used some of KYND's risk, well, all of KYND's risk analysis technology this week, and actually ran the top 200 UK law firms. And shockingly, KYND found that only 11% had the correct email protection in place. And that's obviously a real surprising one, because legal is one of the most hit sectors. Certainly we see that from some of the work we do in the insurance side of things in terms of claims. But also to just go one step further than that in highlighting this, and not to scare, well, yes, to scare you is actually the real reason we did this. We actually took all the email addresses that have signed up to this event. And so the kind of email protection in the room, ran them through KYND's technology. And we can reveal that 86% of you have emails that are spoofable. But luckily there are some simple steps that go a long way, and it's all around authentication. It's turning on some basic email policies. Slight jargon alert here. I'm not going to go into these. Perry is actually a bit of a whiz with the email side of things. So if you've got any questions, Phil, he'll be better than I am. I'm getting there. I'm pretty good. But no, DMARC, DKIM, SPF. There's some simple things that can just be switched on internally, and it makes a big, big difference. The second area I just want to talk to you about is internet domains and the risk of losing control of these. Internet domains are obviously hugely critical for any business that trades online. It's the face of your business. In many regards, it's the engine room to your operation. So the ownership, the management, the protection of your domain is a priority, and is again often misunderstood and overlooked. We've all heard of Reg123 and GoDaddy, but when a domain is registered using a personal or individual email, it's more prone to social engineering attacks to obtain domain logins or account details, let alone all the email spoofing stuff we were just talking about. I was just talking about. Just to throw some real life kind of case studies in there, because when I started working in cyber risk and I was working for KYND, it was one of the things that really interested me, coming from a non-cyber background. A Brazilian bank had its entire internet footprint hijacked, and basically they changed the registration of their domain. They then essentially rerouted all of the bank's online customers to perfectly reconstructed fakes of the bank's actual sites. So customers, of course, had no clue, landed on the pages, and the hackers were collecting a lot of details, login details. They also then simultaneously redirected all transactions of ATMs and point of sale systems to their own servers, again, collecting credit card details, super expensive to sell that on, of course. And all of this was done in real time one Saturday afternoon. Now, of course, that's a really big, elaborate example. But why it's interesting is that just by a simple error in terms of the domain registration using a personal kind of company email address, they were then in that scenario where they were firefighting a situation. They were totally paralyzed. They couldn't even communicate with their customers to let them know they'd had alert. It was a complete shutdown. A bit closer to home, the John Lewis wedding gift list site, the domain expired, and it was purchased by someone, and John Lewis had to buy it back. Obviously, massive brand and reputational damage, business interruption. So again, some simple things that can be done, enabling two-factor authentication, set up alerts for the domain expiry. And when it comes to registration of the domain, it's just registering using a generic email and having it go to more than one person. Finally, the last area I just want to touch on is external internet services. Now that can sound, or does sound, a little bit boring, but it's essentially the way to think of it. It's all the things that keep you operational. They can be things like email servers or file servers or remote desktop access software. But think of it as the things that keep the business moving forward. And like anything, that it needs to be updated, like an operating system or your phone. So all of these internet services, they come with an exposure and a vulnerability and a weakness when that happens, because the companies that build these services let the world know that they need to be updated. And then from there, all eyes are on which companies haven't updated. And that's where obsolete services without bug fixes, and ultimately that's the potential in. The origin of the global ransomware attack that affected many companies in June 2017 was a service at a small software provider that essentially was using an out-of-date piece of software. The ransomware spread, exploiting vulnerabilities in the other out-of-date software. The NHS reported a loss of 92 million. The global shipping company Maersk lost 300 million. In both of these examples, the exploit was actually patched by Microsoft the year before. And had these companies ensured that they were keeping the services up to date, these losses, of course, could have been avoided. So again, some things that you can do the pesky updates, upgrade the obsolete software. And that's really it. What I just want to kind of end on is just, I hope that's been of some help. I'm quite happy to talk to companies after this, of course. I just want to kind of just mention a little bit about why I'm talking to you about this. What is KYND doing in this space? We actually set up KYND in 2018 to do one thing, and that was to empower businesses of any size to identify and manage their cyber risks. And we do that for some of the largest insurance companies, some of the largest legal networks, retail brands in the world, from clients as far away as the Dominican Republic to Canada to Indonesia. But we specialize in, by just taking the inputting the internet domain of your business, KYND can then map in a matter of seconds the extent of your online infrastructure, the risks that are connected to that organization, and then including the three areas that I've been talking about today. And we do that real time. It's non-intrusive. We're not inside the company's architecture. This is outside in, the way the cyber criminals look at companies. And we make that information accessible, tangible, and actionable. So everyone from security practitioners to heads of IT, all the way through to the non-specialist users and business leaders can get a grip of what's happening. I will finally end on, there's two companies that are actually watching this, that are here today, and that have actually elected to put their web domain through the KYND machine, which we've done today, which gives me an opportunity to just quickly show you a kind of start report, which is one of our products, and essentially some of the risks that the analysis is throwing up. These companies, of course, will know who they are. We've hidden the details of the reports, of course. The first is a large organization in the charity sector. And I just want to show the first 2 pages of this. Obviously, you can see the dials at the top. 9 high risks. And we know, of course, in this, every sector is targeted, of course. In the charity sector, actually, it's surprisingly quite high. Particularly smaller charities tend to have a lack of cyber awareness across trustees. Phishing, malicious emails remain the most common form of attack charities when I last checked. And as you see, we not only highlight the risk, what the report is showing, but then also some peer-to-peer analysis showing your company in relation to others. The next company, and this company in question, I'm happy to talk to you after and give you this report, of course. The next company is an independent internet service provider. and in and around the education sector, and they have a large number of red risks. And that's because KYND has actually found a whole bunch of domains connected to that first domain, and with that, a whole load of services as well. So that seems like a lot of red risks. It seems very, very scary. The green dial there is actually showing a lot of good stuff. So it's really a case of just giving that top-down visualization. You can actually ring fence quite a few of those domains, deal with it, and it will bring the dials down. So it's not as scary as it sounds, and it gets you in a much better position. Finally, this is the recommendations, the top 5 things that you should do. You'll notice things like update vulnerable software, close developer access, email spoofing. So all the stuff I've talked about today, we can show you that very, very quickly, and it's very, very simple. It's all about simplicity with KYND. Thank you very much for listening to me babble on now. I'm going to hand over to Perry. I've obviously been looking at the commercial side. Perry's going to be continuing that, and also looking at the personal side with cyber risk. And kind of post-breach, because this is very much pre-breach. So thanks very much, guys, and I will hand over to Perry.
Thanks, Mike. As Ben mentioned, I'm going to carry on for a little bit on the commercial side, so business users, and sticking with cyber risk. So what happens if a business does suffer any sort of cyber attack? And there's multiple issues that you could suffer here. I'm just going to talk for a few of these that are on screen now. Being hacked, obviously the one that comes to mind quite quickly, and I think we've probably all heard the same term banded around, that data is more expensive or more important than oil now. Business interruption is something that's very likely to happen. Obviously, if you've been involved in any sort of cyber incident, it's going to mean that you're either not able to use your systems, your laptops, computers, or whatever. And it's going to mean that your staff, or you as a business owner, as a managing director, you're going to have to stay at the office longer, put more manpower in, make more phone calls rather than emails, and ultimately spend tons and tons of time trying to get this back up and running. Brand reputation, I always use the same analogy for this, and the guys have heard it quite a lot. So something that you probably don't think about as being involved in a cyber incident, but when I was at Comprehensive, for a 2-week period, if you went to my school web domain, it had been hacked and it had been turned into a porn site for a 2-week period. So obviously the hit rate went up, a lot more people viewing the site, but it's very detrimental to that school's brand. And our old commercial director, when I told him that story, he said, imagine if that was a private school and you've got parents that are paying 50 or 60 grand a year for their kid to go to that school, and now that whole entity is a laughing stock and they don't want to send the kids there anymore. So, you know, it's a real hard time trying to get back on track with your customers, and the next point is losing customers. Also, for the last few years, there's been the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office. So if you're a business that holds on to customer data, you have to be registered with them, and you have to let them know about any breaches within a 72-hour period. And the fines for these can be massive, enough to put most businesses out of business straight away. So I think it's capped at something like 20 million euros, about 18 million pounds, or 4% of global turnover. So it can be a huge impact on that business. So Ben explained the risk management process. So we used to call it prevention rather than cure, but then Michael, who you heard from first, said you can't really prevent a cyber attack from happening. So it's more like taking the steps to prevent it, the risk mitigation process. What you'll see on screen now is what a cyber insurance policy for a business should look like and what it's made up of. And some things on screen you would expect to be covered. Just for anyone that doesn't know the terminology, first party is the person that actually has the cyber insurance policy, and then third party is any claims that could be made against you as a business for you causing any damage for a cyber attack or a cyber incident. I'll pick a few of these out. So fund transfer also comes along with social engineering. This is probably the one that as a business owner you're more aware of. So, and it's one that's in the press all the time. So a cyber criminal actually gaining access to your bank account and stealing funds, or potentially getting into your PayPal account if you're an eBay trader or anything like that and stealing money. And social engineering is a term that's banded around on cyber insurance policies as well. But and I'll explain that. So we've probably all got a friend that shares a little bit too much on social media. They'll tag where they are with the locations, they'll share photos and updates about their birthday. Social engineering has been able to pull all these different strands together to make a larger picture about that person, and then potentially guess passwords or pose as them for accounts that they hold, guess their security questions, and kind of piecing that kind of persona to gain access to their products and services that they subscribe to. Remediation cost is a massive thing that we make a big point on when we're out pitching cyber insurance. And it's the fact that if you're a business of any size, really, if you're involved in a cyber breach, it's probably unlikely that you have got the IT know-how or even the IT team to support you and getting you back on track. So Ben gave the example there of Travelex. They're a massive firm, trade in multiple different territories. They had cyber insurance. They had a huge IT team, and they were still down for a six-week period for a ransomware attack, unable to process transactions, do international money transfers, a huge impact. So for a business to be able to, walk in a morning and there's a ransomware attack, a virus, anything around cyber, to be able to pick up the phone and get support from an IT specialist or IT forensics rather than just worrying about it yourself, is a big plus. And also what comes wrapped in there is PR support. So if you need to get back on side with your customers after one of these breaches or any issues, that's something that's also included within there. Cyber extortion, Ben touched on with the Travelex, so ransomware. So if you imagine you're walking in the morning, you turn your laptop on and your screen is locked. You can't log onto any programs and it's just a screen demanding that you pay some money. And these guys are really good with marketing geniuses. So you look at the screen and you cannot get your data back until you pay us this amount of money. And it's usually something like $3,000. But it'll give you a countdown and it'll say, we want you to pay this money within 3 days or we're going to delete your data. If you leave it 5 days, the amount goes up to $5,000. And they also want paying by Bitcoin. But if you don't know how to use Bitcoin, there's a handy little link in there to a YouTube video that'll explain how to open a Bitcoin account, how to pay them securely so they're not being able to be tracked. So they've worked out the best way to try and get money out of people and extort them. And most smaller businesses will just pay it. They haven't got the resource or the infrastructure to try and fight this sort of thing, and they'll just pay the ransom. And what happens 9 times out of 10 is they know you're a sucker and they're going to then put another attack on you within the next couple of weeks or whatever, because they know you're going to pay that amount of money. A couple of things on here that probably you wouldn't expect to have included within a cyber insurance policy. Doesn't kind of go hand in hand, but PCI, so PCI and DSS stands for Payment Security Standards, Data Security Standards, get my teeth in. And this is all around if you process any sort of card transactions or online payments. So the way that this tends to work is if you imagine you own a retail location, like a news agent or an outlet selling clothes, you probably had the Barclay guy come in and he's told you need to do card transactions and he's got you to fill an agreement in that says you understand terrorist financing, money laundering, all this sort of stuff, and you self-certify. What a cyber insurance policy would do is if you breach any of those terms and your account is suspended for a set number of times, set period of time, it would cover the reassessment costs to get you set back up, and it would also cover your loss of revenue in between that time. An example I've got here is I was in a shop a few months back, and there was a guy walking around, basket full of shopping, fills it up, goes to the till, taps his card with contactless, walks around the shop again, fills his basket again, taps his card again, goes around a third time. And I'm thinking, either this guy's forgot his PIN code or he's nicked that card and the guy behind the till has not got a clue what's going on. And more than likely what's going to happen is Barclaycard or his provider is going to ring him in a few weeks' time and say, this card's been reported as stolen. Why did you put these transactions through? And from that point, you've got a bar on your account. So again, not something you expect to have included within a cyber insurance policy. Okay. on here, so which sectors are vulnerable to a cyber attack? What we did is we went away and we aggregated all of our data from our cyber insurance sales, thinking there was going to be a few standout sectors that were more in tune with the risks and know that they're an easy target or to protect themselves. What we found is, one, brokers are doing the job and they're selling it to multiple sectors, but also there's kind of an overall feeling that there's no one sector that is a target. If you're trading online, using laptops, if you're connected to the internet, you are at risk. As Ben mentioned, we can run a KYND check on pretty much any business and it will show some sort of threat there. And a good example is my colleague Shelley. She always calls around our brokers to get updates. And one of the connections that she's made is with a broker that sells into agriculture, into farming. And you probably wouldn't think that farms or people processing milk or products to sell to wholesalers are really at risk. But we found that all of their computer systems for automation are running software that's linked to the internet. And potentially if they click on an email that's got a virus in there and knocks them down, knocks them off the grid, that's potentially a big issue for them to be able to keep that process going. So we started to see quite a high increase in that sector as well. So that was business, the commercial space. Now on to personal. So last year, we found, or generally, there was 4.2 billion unique identities found available freely on the dark web and on the dodgy places of the internet. So that's, things like email addresses, passwords, credit card information, passports, driving licenses, been shared on marketplaces and forums that potentially you might know that they've been included in a breach or maybe not. Some for sale and some just bulk uploaded to parts of the internet where people will go in and just take that information. We've seen quite a big rise in the amount of breaches we've found with emails and passwords, so username and actual passwords together. So an increase of 10%, which makes it much more likely that you're going to be involved in a breach as they've got all your information to log into your accounts. And also a huge increase in the amount of personal data that's included within those breaches. So when you're thinking about personal information, it tends to be three categories. So PII, PFI, and PHI. So the first one is personally identifiable information. So that would be passports, driving license, date of births. The F is for financial. So credit card information, bank account details. And the H is for health. So think about your medical data being shared on the internet, probably because of that WannaCry attack, because they got all the data from the NHS. You wouldn't really want that out there in public. The next one is, so these are the top 10 breaches by scale in history. So we're not just talking about a few users that have been breached. You've got into a small business and you've made a breach, but some of these are hundreds of millions of accounts that have been scraped. They've got in by some sort of, like Ben mentioned, some sort of non-updated program, and potentially got all this information and leaked it onto the dark web. So keep these in mind, because we've done some case studies a little bit further on. Okay. We tend to, as personal users, be very careful when it comes to our own financial information. So we will protect our online accounts, and probably that's one of the only ones where I have a secure password on. We'll take a bit of extra time to make sure our NatWest or our Monzo Bank has got a secure password. We're not the same when it comes to our email accounts. So generally, we've got 27%, so more than a quarter of people that use the same passwords for multiple accounts. That really shoots up when it comes to the 18 to 25 age bracket. So half of that group have the same passwords for multiple accounts. And only 10% of people that we surveyed have two-factor authentication set up on their accounts, which is probably the most simple thing you can do to stop being included in a breach. And basically all that is if you go into, probably my one piece of advice when you're leaving this session today is go to your email account, Outlook, Gmail or whatever, go into settings and try and find two-factor authentication. And all you have to do is give that provider your phone number, and every time you log in from a new device, it will just send you a text message with a code in. And it's very unlikely that anyone's going to have access to your email, your password, and your phone. So your rates have been included in some sort of breach or hack is massively diminished. So that's my tip. Okay, so but why should you worry about your email account so much? It's the access point to all of your online world, and everything that you can think of is saved on there. Think of all the accounts that you've got for your bank accounts and your insurance searches and your insurance documents, and everything is on there. If you take out a mortgage and you send the solicitor documents, all of that is saved in your sent items. You've sent them your pay slips, your national insurance number, your driving license, probably your old payment terms for your mortgage as well. So you've got all of that information that no one ever goes back and clears out. So if anyone actually gets into your email account, there's a lot of damage that they could do. And also, cyber criminals tend to lay dormant in your email account. So if they have access to your email address and your password, they don't have to do anything right now, but potentially they could just wait and monitor and see if anything pops up. Just monitor the thread. So for example, in my old role, what we used to find was there'd be cyber criminals that have got access to your email, and a trigger for them was when you're going on holiday, and there'll be, Facebook links to say you've been posting about your holiday, and they know what dates you're going to go away. And as soon as you've gone away, you're not going to look at your phone that often. They could potentially send out emails to some of your contacts, your mum, your dad, your aunties, and say, I've been involved in an accident. Please, could you send me some money via this money transfer company? And I need £500 to pay the hospital bills. So potentially, it can cause you a lot of damage. OwlDetect is a service that we provide at CPP, and it's a dark web monitoring service. And you can log on, give us many different assets that I've already mentioned: email address, phone number, bank account details, and you can scan it against information that we found on the dark web. So last year we found almost 2 billion pieces of data that we fed into this system, over 30 million passwords with associated usernames, 124 million phone numbers that were available on the dark web. Your phone numbers are quite a strange one as well, because you wouldn't think that that's very important if someone has access to your phone number. But what we found is there's a thing on the dark web called a sucker list, and tends to be for older people. You get cold calls and they'll ask you to pay for products and services. And if they know that you're susceptible to these sort of scams, they'll add your number to a list, and you'll get lots more phone calls to try and scam you out of money. And so it's not a great thing. If you think about all the sort of companies that you've logged onto, so on your email account, you've probably got MOTs, insurance companies that you can log into. You've got your online banking. It would be great if they kept all these data safe, but we know that there's been so many breaches like EasyJet, BA, LinkedIn. The information is likely out there. And the final thing I'll mention before we go into the case studies is we're all on Zoom now. And at the beginning of the year, there was a big publicity announcement about Zoom being hacked. It wasn't actually the case. What had happened is a cyber criminal had gone to the dark web, found one of these huge amounts of leaked information, and they used a process called credential stuffing. And what that means is they've got a username, which is usually your email address, and your password, and they just fired them at the Zoom account, and something like 200,000 of those worked. So that just really reinforces the point around making sure you've got different passwords, you're not using them in different accounts, and they're a bit more, bit stronger than password 123. So the next bit is we've run some of our attendees today through the OwlDetect platform. And the first one is Oliver. So we scanned his Yahoo account, and we found that he'd been included in 5 different breaches. So for Canva, MyHeritage, LinkedIn, Tumblr, so all these accounts that he's gone to make a profile, his email address and his password is freely available on the dark web. Next one, you've heard from Ria already, so we ran hers through it as well. 4 alerts. So Ria's popped up on Canva, MyFitnessPal. So again, back to that list. Ria's been included in that one just for monitoring her calories. She's been included in a breach. And Richard looks at too many dodgy websites because he's got 30 alerts. I'm only kidding. But yeah, things like LinkedIn, Adobe, Last.fm, Dropbox, all big brand names that we've probably all got accounts with that we've been included in breaches, but we just don't know about. Richard, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously a big list in there. I think it's probably reflective of the fact that I've had online accounts for longer than some of the other people tested. But I think it's fair to say as well that you look at the sites that have been compromised. You look behind the scenes at some of the information that's been found, especially when you're able to see sort of hints of what the actual password was that was found. And it becomes very, very compelling. It really does sort of make you realise how much of your information is out there and how important it is to look into it. So, frankly, there's very little we can do to stop our data getting out there. But knowing that it's out there is really, really valuable. The sooner you know, the better. As Michael said right at the very beginning, there are things we can do proactively to reduce our risk, like adding two-factor authentication and cycling up passwords regularly. But it's also good to get an early warning if your details have been found out there, so that you can start to unpick what the implications might be and take action before those people start watching your email inbox are able to do anything too damaging.
Yeah. And I was saying, when I joined CPP, I had no idea about this. I was the lazy consumer that just uses the same password over and over again. I got an Aldotect account and it scared me to death. Mine popped up like 19 times. And it's quite terrifying to see that your email is there, but also there's certain characters of your password as well that proves it's the correct one, the most up-to-date version. So what should you do? So Ben has given you some examples of what you should do to keep yourself safe in the business world. If you're a company owner or you're an IT guy that you need to protect yourself. From a personal consumer point of view, if you take away anything, go away from today and just enable two-factor authentication on your personal emails. It will prevent any sort of breaches, and it just increases your security tenfold. Use strong and unique passwords. We all fall foul to this. There's a great Michael McIntyre comedy sketch that's just been come out about us all having the same bloody password. So yeah, try and have, I think it's something like 4 different words in a row. Again, it would take something like 20 million years to break it if it was put through a number cruncher. Secure your devices. Have thumbprint ID, Face ID. Have a password biometric. Just make sure it's got some sort of lock on there. And finally, clean up after yourself. The example I gave about the email domain, if you're sending documents to your solicitor, just go in there and clean it out and get rid of anything that people could find. It's just so easy to take a picture with your phone and just send it across. But just make sure you're clearing up. In fact, one of our business partners, we had a call with him last week. Before we started, he was like, "Just got to ask you one thing. I've just sent my mortgage details through and I've put the wrong email address in. It's gone to someone else. It didn't bounce. What do I do?" Like, oops. You probably want a CFAS license to make sure there's no credit taken out in your name, but it's easily done. So two-factor authentication, strong password on your phone, and clean up after yourself with your email sent items. And that is it. So you've heard me, Michael and Ben rabbit on for quite a while now. So if you've got any burning questions, or if there's any that I haven't seen that Ria wants to tell me, Ben chucked me under the bus there, but if you want to have any technical questions, really, really complicated, ask Ben.
There is a question in the chat about why there is such low uptake of cyber insurance at the moment.
That's a pretty easy one, and it's because SMEs just don't think that it's going to happen to them. The names we've rattled through, British Airways, EasyJet, LinkedIn, all these massive names, you see the names in the headlines and you think, Mr. Smith that owns the news agents or has an online e-commerce platform. Why would they come to me and target me? What have I got that they're going to want? And the glaringly obvious thing is you don't take care of your security. You're the easy target. They can probably break into 10, 15, 20 different accounts in a day, get in with minimal effort, get a decent payload and leave and just do the same thing over and over. It takes a lot more skill to get into a business like British Airways. So we've just seen a huge change in cyber criminals taking a different angle and just going, I'm going to attack these guys that are easy targets, that are now in 2020 holding much more customer data. They're much more active online. They're sharing more information than they should do. And they've got easy targets within their organization that we can pick on using social engineering and potentially get a gateway in.
I think there's a second aspect to this, Perry, as well, and you won't be surprised to hear it because I bat on about this all the time internally in CPP. But I think there's a responsibility on the part of professional business advisors, not just insurance brokers, but insurance brokers are at the top of this list, to make their clients aware, to make SMEs aware that this is an insurance that they need as much as they need anything else in terms of risk management. That's part of their role. And I'm afraid that it's not just down to SMEs not realizing that they need the cover. They need to be told as much as they need to be told about any other risk management factors in their businesses. And actually, the point that we're trying to make with all of this today is that cyber risk is right at the top of the chart of vulnerabilities. So it's a question of awareness, but I think that SMEs need to be advised and their professional advisors need to take the bull by the horns and tell their customers, the SMEs, that this is what they need. Here endeth the sermon.
Anyone else got any questions?
Oh, just had a question from Joe on the personal side. So can we elaborate on the dark web and what this entails?
Sure. So you've basically got three levels of the internet. There's the internet where you can go to and you can Google, and there's a big categorization of all the domains that it'll find. You type in ASOS, eBay, and it'll go there and it'll find it. The next stage down from that is the deep web. So that's what Google doesn't have searchability of. It doesn't index. You'd have to know the web domain to go away and find it. And then the step down from that is the dark web. And you couldn't access that from Internet Explorer, from Chrome. You'd need a dedicated browser that's set up to securely go into those sorts of domains. And it doesn't track you. It's set up to block your identity. And that's the sort of portal that people use. I don't know if anyone's heard about the Silk Road. It was a massive, it was like Amazon, but obviously not as big. And you could go on there using a web browser called Tor, and you could have an account, and you could go on there and you could buy drugs or cyber attacks or hits on people. But yeah, you need the sort of credentials to get into there in the first place. So yeah, you've got internet, deep web, and dark web. Any more?
Yeah, we've just had one more question pop up. So do you think businesses are more at risk from cyber criminals with more employees working from home at the moment? So what's the impact of COVID?
Perry, do you want? Certainly from KYND's aspect, all of our metrics, all the stuff that we've been monitoring, which for us is good business, of course, has just gone through the roof. As we mentioned at the start, it's just kind of been a surge. I think what's quite interesting about this whole thing continues, why there's not one company that fixes it, because it's a continually evolving. As companies increase their digital footprint, there's more people working from home, as the question specifically says. With working from home, there's a natural need to then increase that digital capability within a company to operationally be able to work remotely. It's more surface area. There's more touch points. There's more ways, more exposure, more vulnerabilities. So for KYND, it's been actually, there's more need for what we do in terms of being able to give that immediate visualization. So it's been good for us. It's not good for small companies that are now forced into this new environment of working from home. So yeah, I mean, it has certainly pushed all metrics up. I don't know if that's the same for what Perry's seen as well, but certainly from KYND side, that's the case.
Yeah.
And I think this is a point where SMEs' vulnerabilities is disproportionately high as well. So for CPP, for example, because we've got an IT team and we're a relatively large multinational business, when we're working from home, I don't want to tempt fate here, but when we're working from home, we're tied down with very strong protocols, and we have highly sort of elaborate VPNs, etc., to keep us well protected. I think for small businesses, they don't have the wherewithal to put those protections in place, and therefore, or they think actually they don't have the wherewithal to put those protections in place, because putting protections in place which will give them much more strength against some of the attacks than they would have by not doing it is not rocket science. It's not that complicated. But I think SMEs don't have the wherewithal and the infrastructure to be able to do it automatically. Therefore, when the pandemic hit and we all went into lockdown in March and businesses started working remotely, a lot of it was on a wing and a prayer, quite frankly. And that's why SMEs, I think, because they haven't had these protections in place prior to the pandemic, find themselves in a position where they've had to play catch up ever since. I don't know whether that's what you mean actually, Ben, when you say that you've seen these vulnerabilities increasing more and more.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah, and it's just I think it's in the same nature where it's kind of, I liken it to a bit of a crude analogy, but really with cyber risk, it's a bit like a cancer in the sense that the vectors of attack change every hour. The digital footprint and working from home has an effect on that, increases exponentially all the time. And that continually changing landscape is what means that it's very hard to find one solution that fits all. So it's a very, very fluid scenario that needs businesses, SMEs and large corporations just stay on top of it, stay ahead of it.
I think I try and straddle both arguments. So personal and business we've seen a massive rise in the amount of cyber attacks and people hosting phishing attacks because, quite frankly, there's more eyeballs on screens. We're sat here all day long on a laptop, on a phone. We've got nowhere else to go, and they're just opportunists. So they know that they've got the prime conditions to kind of trip us up, to get us to click on a wrong link and reveal personal data. So they're just making the most of a good situation for them and a bad situation for us.
We've had a few more questions come up, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So if you we'll make a note of these and we'll email you with your follow-up questions, because there's just a few more come through.
Okay. Yes, we must be on time. So I'll say that thanks for joining us, everyone. We are going to, if you've got any further questions, feel free to drop us an email. I'm sure you've had the reminders. So it's sayhello@cpp.co.uk. Feel free to reach out to myself, Ben, or Michael after this. We're going to be putting a social post out on LinkedIn from CPP Group UK's account. Please help us out with a like or a share or a comment. It'd really help. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us, and hope you enjoy the rest of the festival and any of the events you're going to. But thanks.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
See you guys.